Between Europe and Asia, economic dialogue, humanitarian missions, multi-vector operating and the search for compromises in the world arena. How else does Kazakhstan participate in the development of the modern world? For more details, watch the program Kazakhstan International Vectors. Today you will find out how does Kazakhstan seek to ensure security of the entire region in emergency situations, what does the Red Crescent Society in the Republic do, and what recommendations does the UN provide in disaster risk reduction.
Every day in the world, events that affect people's lives occur. Natural disasters are the most large-scale, destructive and often unpredictable. Over the past decade, as a result of natural disasters, more than 700,000 people died in the world. Almost 1.5 million people were injured. Approximately 23 million lost their homes. In total, as a result of disasters, more than 1.5 billion people were affected in one way or another. At the same time, the total economic damage of countries amounted to almost $1.5 trillion. In the field of security in emergency situations, as well as in their prevention and reduction of the consequences of disasters, states unite at both regional and international levels.
All Central Asian states are subject to the same emergency situations. These are primarily earthquakes, floods, landslides, mudflows and avalanches. Often their consequences cannot be eliminated by the forces and means of only one country. Understanding such threats, Kazakhstan proposed to establish an appropriate center that could coordinate the work of the emergency services of all Central Asian countries in emergency situations and to reduce risks of possible disasters. The procedure for creating the center lasted more than 10 years, because this process is very long. But in the end, an agreement was signed between the government of the Republic of Kazakhstan and the government of the Kyrgyz Republic. It was signed by the Minister of Emergency Situations of Kazakhstan at that time, Mr. Bozhko, and Minister for Emergency Situations of Kyrgyzstan, Mr. Boronov. This agreement was ratified in 2014 by the Parliament of Kazakhstan and in 2015 by the Parliament of Kyrgyzstan. That is, an agreement has basically formed the center. In September 2014, the Center for Emergency Situations and Disaster Risk Reduction was opened in this building, which the government of Kazakhstan provided free of charge. The main tasks of the center are coordination of the work of the two states, coordination of the work of states with international organizations, non-governmental organizations on disaster risk reduction, attraction of new science and new technologies to our states, coordination of operational issues in large-scale emergencies, training, knowledge and technology, and so on. That is, the entire complex of issues in principle which exists in the sphere of emergency situations is legislatively assigned as a function of the center. Valery Petrov spent his entire life working in emergency services. Now he heads the center in Almaty and transfers his experience to his colleagues. Now we will walk through the rooms that are used for the training process, for training courses, seminars, and in general for the major international events. This is a classroom. UN experts, major scientists and world-renowned experts share their experience with representatives of emergency services from not only Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, but also from other countries of Central Asia and the South Caucasus. It is said here that the introduction of new technologies is necessary for effective rescue and liquidation works. Here we are trying to leave traces of this work to some extent. And if you look, then here is protection of migrants in emergency situations. A meeting on the draft law on the Red Crescent Society of Kazakhstan, which was held jointly with the Red Crescent and with the deputies of the Majlis. Here, let's say, the training on the Sendai framework program, which was held in Korea in the city of Incheon. This is the room where the employees of the center work. According to the agreement, it is determined that each participating state allocates 5 people for work in the center. Each of them was specially trained. And this is the premises of the Crisis Center. It has not yet begun its work on a full scale, but very soon representatives of all UN structures, as well as emergency services of the participating countries, will work here. That is, full cooperation will be organized here in order to more effectively conduct rescue operations and to facilitate the life and destiny of the population that will find themselves in emergency situations. The center today is practically fully equipped. Now we are solving the problem of installing satellite terminals here so that we can work even in the conditions of destructive earthquakes in Almaty. Kazakhstan is subject to the risk of almost all types of emergencies and disasters. As in other countries, in the course of such accidents, the state response services, ambulance, firefighters and rescuers come to the aid of the victims.
In 2016, 11,500 emergencies and incidents of natural and man-made nature have been registered in Kazakhstan. To eliminate their consequences, more than 49,000 rescue operations and 450 flights were carried out.
In the event of an emergency, employees and volunteers of the Red Crescent Society of Kazakhstan are also among the first on the scene. They assess the needs of the affected population and, if necessary, provide first aid. This organization is part of the international movement of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, the largest and most respected humanitarian community in the world. National Red Cross or Red Crescent Societies exist in those countries that are parties to the Geneva Convention. Kazakhstan joined them immediately after gaining independence. At the same time, the National Red Crescent Society of the Republic was established by the presidential decree.
We prepare people, get them ready for emergencies in peacetime and react during emergency situations. That is, if suddenly something happens, we have the rapid response teams. We go to the site, make an assessment and provide humanitarian support.
There are national societies alike in 190 countries of the world. Each of them chooses its main line of business. For example, the Jewish Red Cross specializes in providing first aid to the victims. The American Red Cross allocates most of its resources to attracting blood donors and further transportation of blood.
In our national society, we have chosen 5 areas. First, I already said this, the preparation and response in case of emergency. The second is first aid training. The third direction is the involvement of blood donors. That is, we are also engaged in this area. The fourth is a medical and social direction. That is, we are doing projects on tuberculosis, on HIV/AIDS, and also we have a project on medical care for refugees. And the fifth direction is the spread of humanitarian values. But this is the statutory activity of the whole movement in general.
The humanitarian assistance that the staff and volunteers distribute among the victims is the essentials: water, food, clothing and footwear, hygiene products, sleeping accessories, which are purchased from donations collected from organizations and individuals. In addition, the representatives of the organization are sure that they could take on a part of the state's worries in the prevention of emergencies.
Globally, disasters losses have increased to over 250 to 300 billions of US dollars a year. Over 80% of economic losses from disasters are due to weather-related issues. And only in 2015, over 22,000 people lost their life. Still, last year, 19.2 million people were displaced due to disasters in over 113 countries. This is clearly a very concerning picture. And to give you a practical example, we can see the impact of these disasters in a country. Serbia, for instance, in 2014, due to the floods, lost $2 billion, which basically turned the country into a recession.
Being aware of the seriousness of the problem, the international community in 2015 agreed on cooperation in ensuring security in emergency situations. The first international agreement in this direction was the Sendai Framework Program. It clearly defines priorities in the work of states on disaster risk reduction in order to achieve sustainable development of all countries in the world.
The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction identifies 4 priority areas, among them understanding the risks associated with natural disasters, strengthening coordination mechanisms to enhance the effectiveness of disaster risk reduction efforts, providing funding for disaster risk reduction programs, reconstruction works at a higher quality level.
In addition, the Sendai program identified an important element in the fight against disasters: the unification of efforts of all states. After all, almost always natural disasters and their consequences go far beyond the borders of one country.
Let me give you a very practical example of what it means in practical terms. Let's take Fukushima. Fukushima was an example of one natural hazard that triggered the wave of the tsunami and that impacted in another type of disaster, a nuclear disaster. You can also take the example of the ashes, the volcanic ashes that took place in Iceland a few years back. They had a very strong impact on how airplane companies were able to fly around a portion of Europe, which means that our society are interlinked. Therefore, working in silos is not longer an answer.
In the fight against natural disasters, and which is also crucial, their prevention, the work of international organizations is very important. Some such associations provide humanitarian assistance to the affected population of a particular country. Others bring together world experience in preventing and combating catastrophes and eliminating their consequences.
UNHCR, in all this consideration, is actually the custodian of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. What does it mean? It means that coordinates efforts within the international community, in particular the UN family. And we know that in Kazakhstan, the UN family is very active also in the topic of disaster risk reduction. We are reporting on progress on the implementation of disaster risk reduction activity, which also means that we've been developing a number of tools in order to be able to monitor and to assess through a set of indicators how you are and we are progressing in implementing the Sendai framework.
Every year, modern society is increasingly developing and progressing. New technologies are emerging and construction goes on. In such circumstances, it is important not only to know about modern risks and emergency situations and to take them into account, but also to prevent the emergence of new threats. By the way, $1 spent on disaster prevention saves $7 spent on liquidation its consequences, experts say.
What it means in practical terms is that when we're going to be building a new school, we will know what materials we're going to be using. We're going to ensure that the school will be put in place in a safe area that is not going to be flooded. That the bridges that we're going to be building are not going to be swept away by bomb of waters, so that they're going to be able to contain the impact of climate and extreme weather events. So all this sort of decision and way forward in moving and creating our built environment is going to be a key opportunity to reflect and to include risk consideration.
Over the first year of its work, the Center for Emergency Situations and Disaster Risk Reduction in Almaty conducted more than 30 international trainings, seminars and training programs with the participation of representatives from more than 20 countries, including European Union. All these major events are held in this main situational hall.
Зал рассчитан на вместимостью до 100.
The hall is designed for up to 100 people, equipped with all necessary visualization systems, a translation for 6 languages system, and radio microphones. That is, almost all the systems that are needed, including the life support system, are present in this room. And as I said, quite a lot of major international events are held here. Moreover, not only the events organized by the center, but also the events that are carried out by large UN agencies.
Но и мероприятия, которые проводят большие ООНовские структуры.
The center was created solely to make life for people in emergencies easier, to coordinate the work of relevant services and international organizations, to develop science taking into account international experience, says Valery Petrov.
Мы наладили очень честные, хорошие контакты.
We have established very close, good contacts with the emergency center, which is located in Bangkok. It is a very large center, a major center which covers almost all of Asia and Oceania and partially Europe. We have signed a memorandum with them, and now we are going out to practical stages of implementing our joint work. We work very tightly with the Center for Disaster Risk Reduction, which is located in Japan in the city of Kobe. The same we developed this cooperation, and by agreement with the European Commission, we hope that sometime in the autumn we will nevertheless visit the European Center for Emergency Situations, and we will also come out to some stages of cooperation. In practice, there are no more centers in the world. There is one in South America, but we haven't reached it so far.
Но пока у нас туда руки не доходят.
The plans for the near future include expansion and strengthening of international cooperation. The center also expects the closest neighbors to join its work.
Афганистан является официальным наблюдателем.
Afghanistan is the official observer at the center. In accordance with the agreement, it is possible, and Afghanistan is now deeply studying the issues of full-fledged joining to the center. But since these procedures are usually associated with very long reconciliation processes, we hope that, nevertheless, they will join in the near future. Today, Tajikistan is working closely enough to join the center. We also hope that in the near future they will join us. In Uzbekistan, they have the new Minister for Emergency Situations, and negotiations with him showed that there is also an opinion to join
О
us.
том, что тоже есть мнение присоединиться.
In matters of safety in emergency situations, awareness plays an important role. Therefore, the Center, together with international organizations and scientific institutions, is already engaged in the development of new teaching methods.
У нас есть
We have our own website, which is up to date, say, on a daily basis. So we have all the attributes of an international organization. The center is registered with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as an international organization. One thing remains, to work harder and harder, which we basically do every day.
чем мы и повседневно занимаемся.
In any work related to the prevention of emergencies or preparation for them, knowledge is the most important aspect. After all, only understanding the possible risks, their seriousness and the likelihood that this or that disaster will happen, the negative consequences, can be prevented or at least minimized, experts say.
And this is going to be a key aspect in order to turn your citizen, your community, from a passive community that doesn't know how to behave or to relate to risk to an active community that can contribute to its resilience. The government of Kazakhstan in this regard has taken a very important step by developing a centers, the Crisis Management Center and Disaster Risk Reduction, that is addressing knowledge and understanding of risk by sharing information, training, but also providing training of trainers. This is a very strong contribution to the sustainability of Kazakhstan in terms of resilience to disasters, but also to the entire Central Asia region.
In general, all the countries of the world that have joined the Sendai Framework for Action, including Kazakhstan, have undertaken to achieve a significant reduction in mortality from earthquakes, floods, hurricanes and other natural disasters by 2030, reduction of economic losses and the scale of destruction. In addition, by 2020 it is planned to increase the number of countries that will develop adequate national plans to implement the risk reduction strategy, expanding international cooperation to assist developing countries in mitigating the effects of natural disasters.